My husband practically owns this city. Name your price and I'll pay it. The sentence sliced through the Providence Municipal Courtroom like a knife. Eleanor Whitford didn't wait for a response. She reached into her designer handbag, pulled out a thick stack of $100 bills, and threw them onto Judge Frank Caprio's bench. Cash exploded across case files, court orders, and 40 years of hard-earned judicial respect. The room froze. Officer Diaz, the bailiff, immediately stepped forward, hand twitching toward his radio, but Judge Caprio lifted a single hand. He didn't look at the money. He didn't look at the bailiff. His eyes stayed locked on Eleanor. "Mrs. Whitford," he said softly, "sit down." And in that second, everyone in that courtroom realized something. This wasn't going to be a normal hearing. This was about to become a lesson money couldn't buy. Before we go any deeper into this story, you're watching Case Closed, where entitlement meets accountability and justice still has a heartbeat. Hit subscribe to Case Closed so you don't miss what happens next, because the way this judge responds to Eleanor's stunt is something you'll remember for a long time.
Did you just throw money at me? I threw it at the situation. There's a difference. Everything has a price, Judge, even you. My husband explained how this works. What Eleanor Whitford didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have imagined, was that the 62-year-old woman sitting in the gallery behind her, the woman Eleanor had harassed in the courthouse lobby 20 minutes earlier, was not just any victim. Martha Reyes was a widow. Her husband, Staff Sergeant Carlos Reyes, had served 3 tours in Afghanistan. He had died saving 6 members of his unit from an IED, and one of the men he saved, the young lieutenant who went on to survive, to build a career, to enter politics, was Senator Graham Whitford, Eleanor's husband, the man she believed would make this all disappear, had a debt to Martha Reyes that could never be repaid. And Judge Caprio knew every detail. Tell us where you're watching from, because what happened next in this Providence courtroom became one of the most shared moments in judicial history. The clock showed 9:58 a.m. Tuesday morning. Case number 2026, CR 914, was about to become something Eleanor Whitford would remember for the rest of her life. Ms. Landry adjusted her microphone. Her hands were steady, but the tension in the room was unmistakable. Everyone had just witnessed something unprecedented. Case number 2026, CR 914, the City of Providence versus Eleanor Marie Whitford. Charges include harassment, disorderly conduct, obstruction, contempt of court, and throwing objects at a judicial officer. "This is absurd," Eleanor said. "I didn't throw anything at anyone. I made an offer." "Mrs. Whitford," Judge Caprio said, his voice carrying controlled fury, "do you understand the charges being read against you?" "I understand that you're wasting my time and my husband's patience." 9:59 a.m. Defendant threw currency at judge's bench. Contempt charge added. Bailio on standby. Money collected as evidence. Judge Caprio studied the woman in front of him. 47 years old, wife of Senator Graham Whitford. No prior criminal record, but a file thick with complaints that had been quietly settled. Harassment of service workers, verbal abuse of campaign staff, a pattern of behavior that had been managed rather than addressed. "Mrs. Whitford, before this hearing began, there was an incident in the courthouse lobby. Would you like to explain what happened?" "Nothing happened. An old woman got in my way and I told her to move." "You told her to move?" "I suggested she relocate forcefully. She was blocking the entrance." "According to security footage, you grabbed her arm and called her, and I'm quoting the report, a useless drain on taxpayer money." Eleanor shrugged. She was going on about veterans' benefits. I simply pointed out the reality. The reality being that people like her expect handouts, while people like my husband actually contribute to society. The words landed like a slap. The arrogance in Eleanor's voice was a performance, but Judge Caprio had spent decades reading defendants. Underneath the
Bravado, he could see something else. Not quite fear. More like the particular kind of confusion that comes from encountering a situation that money couldn't immediately resolve. Mrs. Whitford, let me ask you something. When you threw that money on my bench, what did you think would happen? I thought you'd understand we're all reasonable people, that there's a number that makes problems go away. And when I didn't immediately accept your offer, I assumed you were negotiating. I don't negotiate, Mrs. Whitford. I adjudicate. Everything has a price, Judge. My husband said you don't bite the hand that funds you. Text, screenshot, submitted as evidence from Eleanor to friend. Dated that morning, 8:12 a.m. Court at 10. Don't worry about it. Graham's people already talked to the right people. I'll throw some money at it and be done by lunch. These small-town judges always fold. Judge Caprio read the text aloud. Eleanor's composure flickered. That text was private. It was submitted as evidence by law enforcement. The question is whether it accurately reflects your expectations for this hearing. I was venting to a friend. These small-town judges always fold. Is that what you think of this court, Mrs. Whitford? I think courts understand how the world actually works. Money talks. It always has. Martha Reyes sat in the gallery, her hands folded in her lap. She was a small woman, 62 years old, with the quiet dignity of someone who had learned to carry grief without complaint. Mrs. Reyes, Judge Caprio said gently, would you like to address the court? The widow rose slowly. Her movements were careful. She had a slight limp, a remnant of a car accident years ago that had left her with chronic pain. Your Honor, I wasn't looking for trouble this morning. I came to the courthouse because I had paperwork to file, benefits paperwork from my husband's service. Please continue. I was walking through the lobby when that woman, she gestured toward Eleanor without looking at her, pushed past me. I stumbled. She grabbed my arm and said I was in her way. What happened then? I apologized even though I hadn't done anything wrong. I said I was sorry for being slow, that I have trouble with my hip. She laughed at me. Eleanor shifted in her seat. She said, and I'll never forget the exact words, maybe if your husband had been worth something, you wouldn't need to beg the government for scraps. 10:18 a.m. Victim testimony begins. Defendant shows no visible remorse. Gallery silent. My husband was worth everything, Your Honor. He served 3 tours in Afghanistan. He died saving 6 men from an IED. He was a hero. Eleanor rolled her eyes. Mrs. Whitford, Judge Caprio said sharply, did you just roll your eyes at this woman's testimony about her deceased husband? I'm tired of hearing about dead soldiers. Everyone has a sad story. The temperature in the courtroom dropped 10 degrees. Officer Caleb Warren took the witness stand. He was the officer who had responded to the lobby incident and remained present throughout Eleanor's arrival. Officer Warren, can you describe what you observed? Yes, Your Honor. I was stationed in the courthouse lobby when I heard raised voices. I observed the defendant grabbing Mrs. Reyes by the arm and speaking aggressively toward her. Did you intervene? I did. I asked the defendant to release Mrs. Reyes and step back. She refused initially. She told me her husband was Senator Whitford and that I should, quote, mind my own business before I ended up directing traffic in the middle of nowhere. Did she comply eventually? Only after I informed her that I would be placing her under arrest if she didn't release Mrs. Reyes. At that point, she let go and said, and I'm quoting, fine, but this isn't over. I know people. Body cam audio excerpt. Officer Warren, 9:41 a.m. Ma'am, I need you to step back. Do you have any idea who I am? I'm Eleanor Whitford, Senator Whitford's wife. Ma'am, regardless of who you are, I'll have your badge. I'll have you reassigned to a school crossing for the rest of your pathetic career. Ma'am, if you don't release this woman immediately, I will arrest you. Here, take it then. Sound of paper currency being thrown air. Now we're done, right? That's how this works. Judge Caprio let the audio finish. That's how this works? Is that what you believe, Mrs. Whitford? That throwing money at police officers resolves legal situations? Eleanor's jaw tightened. I was frustrated. The officer was being unreasonable. The officer was doing his job. His job is to keep order, not to harass people who actually matter in this state. Eleanor's composure was cracking, but she wasn't ready to surrender. Your Honor, I think we've all made our points. Can we discuss a settlement, a donation to whatever charity you prefer? My husband's office can facilitate. Your husband isn't here, Mrs. Whitford. He will be, and when he arrives, you'll understand how these things actually work. I've already spoken with Senator Whitford. Eleanor froze. You called Graham when his office reached out to the court yesterday. Your husband wanted to ensure we had complete information about this case. Voicemail transcription from Senator Graham Whitford's chief of staff to court previous day. This message is from Senator Graham Whitford's office. The senator wishes to make absolutely clear that he will not be intervening in case number 2026 CR 94. Any suggestion that his office has attempted to influence this proceeding is false. The senator further notes that he and Mrs. Whitford have been legally separated for 3 months, and that she does not speak for him or his office in any capacity. The senator requests that Mrs. Whitford be treated exactly as any other defendant would be treated. Judge Caprio read the transcription aloud. Eleanor's face went white. Separated? We're not. Graham wouldn't. He filed the papers in June. According to
his office, you were served but refused to acknowledge the documents. That's a lie. He's just trying to... Mrs. Whitford, your husband is on the phone. I think it's time we all heard from him directly. The phone rang once before a voice answered. This is Senator Whitford. Eleanor's expression transformed. Despite the shock of the separation revelation, relief still flooded her features. Surely Graham would explain this was all a misunderstanding. Surely he would fix this the way he always fixed things. Senator, Judge Caprio said your wife is in my courtroom. She's been charged with harassment, disorderly conduct, obstruction, and contempt. Are you aware of the details? I am, Your Honor. I've seen the security footage and the victim. There was a long pause. I know who Mrs. Reyes is, Your Honor. I know exactly who she is. Eleanor leaned toward the phone. Graham, tell them this is all a misunderstanding. Tell them about the donation we can make to... Eleanor, stop talking. The words were sharp, final. Eleanor fell silent. Your Honor, I owe you and this court an explanation, and I owe Mrs. Reyes an apology that I should have made years ago. 10:34 a.m. Senator Graham Whitford, connected via phone. Defendant visibly confused. Court in session. In 2008, I was a young lieutenant serving in Afghanistan. My unit was ambushed. We were pinned down taking fire when an IED detonated 50 meters from our position. He paused. I would have died that day. 6 of us would have died. But our squad leader, Staff Sergeant Carlos Reyes, threw himself on the device. He absorbed the blast. He saved all of our lives. Martha Reyes was crying silently. I never told Eleanor this story. I was ashamed, not of Carlos, of myself. I built a political career on supporting veterans while I couldn't even bring myself to visit his widow. I sent checks through my office, anonymous donations, but I never had the courage to look Martha Reyes in the eye and thank her for what her husband gave me. Like this video if you missed Judge Caprio, because this is exactly the kind of moment that made his courtroom legendary. And now my wife, the woman I'm divorcing because of behavior exactly like this, harassed her in a courthouse lobby, called her a useless drain on taxpayer money, mocked her husband's sacrifice. Eleanor was shaking now. Graham, I didn't know. That's not the point, Eleanor. You didn't know she was connected to me, but you knew she was elderly.
You knew she was struggling. You knew she was a veteran's widow, and you treated her like garbage anyway. That's who you become." Judge Caprio let the silence hold. "Mrs. Whitford, I want you to understand what has just been revealed. The woman you harassed in the lobby this morning, the woman you called a useless drain on taxpayer money, is the widow of the soldier who saved your husband's life." Eleanor's hands were trembling.
Staff Sergeant Carlos Reyes died in 2008 so that 6 young soldiers could come home to their families. One of those soldiers was Graham Whitford. Everything your husband is built, his career, his position, the power you thought would protect you today, exists because of Martha Reyes' husband. I didn't know. Would it have mattered? Would you have treated her differently if you knew she was connected to your husband? Or should you treat every person with dignity regardless of their connections? Eleanor didn't answer. She couldn't. "Your Honor," Martha Reyes said softly, "may I say something, please?" Mrs. Reyes. The widow rose slowly. "I recognized her the moment I saw her. I've seen pictures of her at campaign events. I knew she was the senator's wife." Eleanor looked up sharply. "I didn't say anything because I was embarrassed. Not for myself, for her. For what she's become, for what money and power did to her." She turned to face Eleanor directly. "My husband died saving 6 men. 6 families got to keep their sons, their brothers, their husbands. I've never regretted his sacrifice, not for one day. But when you grabbed my arm this morning and told me Carlos wasn't worth something, I thought, this is what my husband died for, so that women like you could inherit power you didn't earn and mock people you don't understand." Eleanor's composure finally shattered. Tears streamed down her face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know you didn't know, but that's exactly the problem." Judge Caprio turned to his notes. "I've heard enough to make a ruling. Mrs. Whitford, I'm finding you responsible on all charges: harassment, disorderly conduct, obstruction, contempt of court, and throwing objects at a judicial officer." Eleanor nodded. She no longer had the energy to object. "Before I announce your sentence, I want to say something. In all my years on this bench, I have seen many defendants who believe their money or their connections place them above the law. I have never seen anyone demonstrate that belief more clearly than you did when you threw cash on my bench." He paused. "You want to know my 3-word response to that offer, Mrs. Whitford?" Eleanor looked up. "Justice isn't viable." The words landed like a verdict of their own. Sentencing timeline. Case 2026 CR 9914. Days 1 to 7, written apology to Mrs. Reyes, court reviewed. Days 120, 150 hours of community service at veteran support organizations. Immediate $5,000 donation to Rhode Island Veterans Relief Fund. Days 160, complete ethics and conduct program. Day 120, follow-up hearing to assess compliance. Here is what I am ordering. First, you will write a letter of apology to Mrs. Reyes, a real letter, not something a PR consultant drafts. Your own words, your own understanding of what you did and why it was wrong. Yes, Your Honor. Second, you will complete 150 hours of community service at veteran support organizations. You will not be attending galas or writing checks.
We'll be working directly with veterans and their families, helping them with paperwork, listening to their stories, understanding what sacrifice actually looks like. I understand. Third, you will make a donation of $5,000 to the Rhode Island Veterans Relief Fund. This is not a payment to make your problems disappear. This is the beginning of a debt you will spend the rest of your life trying to repay.
Okay. Fourth, you will complete an ethics and conduct program. You will learn, perhaps for the first time, what it means to treat people with dignity, regardless of their wealth or status. Yes, sir. Finally, you will return to this courtroom in 120 days for a follow-up hearing. At that hearing, I will assess your compliance, your attitude, and your transformation. Do you understand all of these terms? I do, Your Honor. The months that followed were unlike anything Eleanor Whitford had ever experienced. She showed up at the Providence Veterans Support Center on her first day, expecting to write a check and leave. Instead, she was handed a mop. Case follow-up log. Week 2. Defendant has completed 14 of 150 required hours. Initial attitude described as resistant and entitled. Staff notes. Defendant seems uncomfortable with direct service work. Assigned to intake desk under supervision. For the first 2 weeks, Eleanor filed paperwork, benefits applications, housing assistance forms, medical appointment requests, the mundane, endless bureaucracy that veterans and their families navigate every day while the rest of the world forgets they exist. She met a woman named Patricia, whose husband had served 4 tours in Iraq and come home with PTSD so severe he couldn't hold a job. They were about to lose their house. She met a young man named Derek, who had lost both legs in Afghanistan and couldn't get his wheelchair repaired because the VA paperwork was backed up for 6 months. She met a grandmother named Rosa, who was raising her 3 grandchildren alone because her son, their father, had died by suicide after the military failed to provide the mental health care he needed. By week 4, something began to shift. "You know what I've learned?" Eleanor said to one of the counselors during a break. "I've learned that I never thought about any of this. Not once. I saw veterans as a talking point for Graham's campaigns, not as real people with real struggles." What changed? Rosa. She told me her son's story, how he came home different, how he tried to get help, how the system failed him. And she wasn't angry. She was just sad, tired, forgotten. Eleanor wiped her eyes. "I've spent my whole life throwing money at problems, but money can't fix what Rosa lost. It can't bring back her son. It can't undo the years of neglect." "So what can you do?" "I can show up. I can listen. I can stop pretending I'm better than the people I'm supposed to be serving." Week 10 brought the meeting Eleanor had been dreading. Martha Reyes came to the Veterans Center for her regular support group meeting. Eleanor saw her in the lobby and felt her stomach drop. She walked over slowly. "Mrs. Reyes?" The widow looked up. Recognition flickered in her eyes, and something else, not anger, something closer to exhaustion. "You're still here?" "Yes, ma'am. It's part of my sentence, but that's not why I keep coming back." Martha studied her. "Why do you keep coming back?" "Because I needed to understand what I did to you wasn't just harassment. It was desecration. Your husband gave his life for people like me, people who never think about the cost of their freedom. And I mocked his sacrifice." She paused. "I can never make that right, I know that. But I can try to become someone worthy of what he did." Martha was quiet for a long time. "I got your letter. I meant every word of it. I could tell it was honest. More honest than I expected. Mrs. Reyes, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just asking for the chance to prove I've changed. Even if you never believe it, even if you never want to see me again." Martha reached out and took Eleanor's hand. "My husband believed in second chances. He believed people could change if they were willing to do the work.
I'm going to honor his memory by believing that too. 120 days after her initial hearing, Eleanor Whitford returned to Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom. She looked different. Not dramatically, no Hollywood transformation, but the arrogance was gone, the designer handbag was absent. In its place was something quieter, more uncertain, but also more real. "Mrs. Whitford," Judge Caprio said, "I see you've completed all terms of your sentence. 150 hours at the Veteran Center, the donation made, the ethics program completed, the letter delivered." "Yes, Your Honor." "The reports from the center say you continued volunteering after your required hours were complete. Is that accurate?" "Yes, sir. I go twice a week now. I help families navigate benefits, paperwork. I listen when people need someone to talk to. I try to be useful instead of important." "That's a significant shift. What changed?" Eleanor took a breath. "I met people who showed me what real sacrifice looks like. Rosa, whose son came home from war and couldn't get the help he needed. Derek, who lost both legs and can't get his wheelchair fixed because of bureaucratic delays. And Mrs. Reyes, who lost her husband saving sick soldiers and never asked for recognition or gratitude." She paused. "I spent my whole life believing money made me better than everyone else. It doesn't. Money just made me blind. Blind to the people who actually hold this country together." Martha Reyes was in the gallery. She stood slowly. "Your Honor, may I speak?" "Please, Mrs. Reyes." The widow walked forward. "4 months ago, this woman grabbed my arm and told me my husband wasn't worth anything. Today,
I've watched her change. Not completely. Change takes time, but she's trying. She's showing up. She's doing the work." She turned to Eleanor. "My husband would have forgiven you. He was that kind of man. He believed everyone deserved a chance to be better than their worst moment. So I'm going to forgive you too. Not because you deserve it, but because holding on to anger doesn't honor his memory." Eleanor broke down crying. "Thank you. I don't deserve your grace." "No, you don't, but you're earning it, and that's what matters." Subscribe if you're over 50 and love real justice, because moments like this are why this courtroom became sacred to so many people. Judge Caprio leaned forward. "Mrs. Whitford, I want to leave you with something. You came into this courtroom 4 months ago and threw money at my bench. You believed your husband's position made you untouchable. You mocked a veteran's widow and told a police officer you'd have his badge. I was wrong about everything." "You were, but being wrong isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning. The question is always what comes next, whether you go back to your old life of privilege and entitlement, or whether you build something worthy of the sacrifice that protects your freedom. I want to build something better, Your Honor. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I know it starts with showing up for the people I used to ignore." Judge Caprio nodded. "Case closed. Mrs. Whitford, but remember, justice isn't buyable."
"Dignity isn't something you buy," Judge Caprio said gently. "And respect isn't something you demand. They're earned, slowly, through humility, responsibility, and the way you choose to treat others." Eleanor swallowed hard. The courtroom watched her finally understand what her money could never purchase. "Your Honor, I know that now," she whispered, "and I intend to spend the rest of my life proving it." Judge Caprio nodded once, firm, final. The gavel struck. And just like that, in a quiet Providence courtroom, a woman who once believed wealth made her untouchable discovered a truth far more valuable than any estate. The only currency that matters is character, and becoming a better human being is the highest form of wealth. It was another moment that reflected the heart of Judge Frank Caprio's legacy. Justice rooted not only in accountability, but in humanity. A reminder that true justice doesn't just correct behavior, it shapes people, inspires change, and leaves the world a little kinder than it was before. If stories like this move you, if you believe in the kind of compassion-driven justice Judge Caprio spent his life championing, like this video, share it, and subscribe to Case Closed. Together, we keep his legacy of fairness, empathy, and courage alive, one story at a time.